Hi. Good morning, my friends and fellow gaming enthusiasts. This is the Fat Man GM's continuing revisitation of Game Designer Workshop's Twilight 2000 series from the early 80s and 90s. The somewhat annoying stuff. The fat cat over here. Yes. No, you can't sit on the book. This is King's Ransom. It is another installment from our friend and fellow member of our various channels, Frank Frey, and Mr. Lester W. Smith. I purchased this in 1987 for $7. $7. Oh, those were the days. Of course, in fairness, minimum wage back then was either $3.35 or $4 something. I don't quite remember now. This is set in Iran. The gist of your group has the player characters. This is a continuing adventure of your existing campaign group. Your player characters have developed a reputation for being stalwart survivalists and adventurers and troubleshooters, and perhaps have been tapped by either one or other of the standing U.S. governments to come here and to assist in the recovery of the Iranian Crown Jewels, or perhaps having found themselves unwelcome in the Poland area after the Black Madonna and a number of other adventures have had to find a way to, or a place to relocate to. Ideally, they could have missed the boat in going home and have been redirected through Iran and the areas in the Middle East to find another route home. It's been established in previous modules and source books that the Middle East is still more or less being fought in a conventional manner, which means that various governments, both the Allies and the Soviet Pact, are still more or less intact, and their military organizations are operating as would normally be considered, in part majorly reasoning because of the immediate supply of fuel, which is problematic everywhere else. Another possible segue for them to get to this region would be to have been involved in the last submarine series, and at some point in the 3 modules, or at the end of the conclusion of the 3rd module, just being more or less let off the boat in the Middle East, and then being segued into the adventure. Of course, as most adventures, the modules and stuff, they could easily just begin here, and you would then either make adjustments for everything that's preceded this to either have already occurred or have yet to occur. It's a matter of just adjusting timeline. It's not a big, way. That's the advantage. The adventures of being the game master is coming up with ways to fit things to our desired campaign results and or our player characters' wishes. So it says here in introduction, King's Ransom was a module for DDW's World War III role-playing game, Twilight 2000. The story follows the adventures of a group of American soldiers in central Iran in the spring of 2001. The information presented in this module will be blah, blah, blah. Create a campaign in central Iran lasting for many weeks or months. This campaign will take the characters from the Zagaros Mountains to an ancient city of Esfahan in central Iran. Details are given for villages, towns, cities, regions throughout the area. Numerous separate adventures along the way can be created. Blah, blah, blah. What it contains. Several alternate subplots and plot twists and main adventures, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Typical of most of these modules. This, as I've said in many of my previous revisitations of the various game material, is a game system that I would consider both rules light or story-based driven, heavily narrative. Now, while I understand the concepts of narrative, I am struggling with the concept of game systems that are solely devoted to that concept, with almost, you call it a minimalist set of rules, and or where the mechanics of the game system take a very far back seat, maybe even in the trunk of the vehicle, so to speak, or the boot of the vehicle, so to speak, for your British friends, and to the concept of the storyteller. Well, the detail and depth of these modules are so well developed that it easily is a storyline based or story driven game system in my view of this. Still struggling with the concept of where some of our fellow members have tried to emphasize this obsession with this narrative style over everything else, to the exclusion of everything else, as if there is no game mechanics involved at all. So it's just something I'm trying to work through. It's just an old man having issues with it. So we got our adventure plot, the story of the Crown Jewels, character backgrounds. For the most part, the Iranian government prior to the Shah and the current incantations as we know it in our politics today, or the politics of the 80s, would have been just like the Saudi Arabia, would have been a monarchy of sorts. And when it occurred its own set of valuables and so forth, it'd be like the British Crown Jewels. These very valuable items were kept in a bank for majority of the decades of the 80s and 70s, and it was through the possession of these items that they underwrote the economy of Iran, the country itself. So they play a vital role or pivotal role. And in this case, we're out to find them or get them. It's a regular old treasure hunt. And then we go venture plot, explaining about the different thrones in Iran. Let's see. Don't sound strange, but I always enjoyed the daily military ritual of polishing boots. True, it's a relatively brainless occupation, but that's why I like it. Polishing boots in the barracks in the evening gives a soldier an opportunity to relax and to let the tension ease away before going about the more enjoyable personal business. It also provides an environment in which rumors fly. We were polishing boots, in fact, when Peterson began to talk about the Iranian Crown Jewels. Do you know what they are? He asked. Sure, I answered. They are the official jewels of the old Iranian monarchs, and the legal tender for Iran used to base upon their value. Any fool knows that, he chided, but you know what they look like. I had to admit I didn't. Well, first he said there were 3 different thrones in Iran. One which was displayed in Tehran with the crown jewels was the Pahlavi coronation throne, said to be solid gold covered in jewels, and had tassels of tiny strung pearls hanging all over it. Next, there were 3 crowns in that display, and at least 4 tiaras, a half dozen swords and scabbards encrusted with jewels, as well as jeweled guns and such. Orders of jewel-covered platters, snuff boxes, brushes, water pipes, and other such imperial household goods. Literally bushels of diamonds, emeralds, rubies, turquoise, because they're native to Iran, of course, and other gemstones, both set and unset, cut and uncut. And to top it all off, there's a solid gold world globe and a stand a meter tall with the oceans done up in emeralds, the continents in rubies and diamonds. I sat there with my mouth hanging open. If it had been anyone but Peterson, I swear they were pulling my leg. But Peterson never does that sort of thing, and what's more, his story was supported by the light of greed which lit his eyes from within. I closed my mouth and suddenly realized I had dropped my boot. I'm sure I picked it up and went back to polishing, and the same light shining in my eyes as well. So, we got an idea here. We got what may be considered a dragon's treasure trove of loot. Now, because Iran is in the heart of oil country, in the Middle East. It is a very valuable piece of territory for both sides, and it's not surprising that in early stages of World War III, the lead up to the war, that the first opportunity presented itself, the Soviets moved in. They first moved in trying to politically control the region, and then later actually invaded it to some degree, which forced NATO to follow suit. It talks about that here. Talks about where the location of the original treasure was at, why the government tried to move it, and how it got hidden. We got our character backgrounds, life up front, conduct of adventure, events, encounters, rumors and intelligence. It says up front, King's Ransom takes place in central Iran. The area shown on the map, page 21. The scene that turns primarily mountain range broken up by broad valleys. The terrain is further broken up by a network of rivers. Before the war, many of these rivers were seasonal, flowing only during the rainy season. As a result of nuclear exchanges of 97, 98, the weather patterns have changed. There's more rainfall, making these rivers active year-round. There's also some changes to patterns of deforestation as well. The mountains also hold high meadows, blah, blah. Central area Iran has always been very populous, unlike the Iranian plateau. So that during the campaigns in 97, 98, the area suffered heavily. Soviet, American, Iranian forces seesawed back and forth, and road junctions, industrial sites, and bridges were destroyed in the fighting. Broad valleys were the scene of tank battles that rivaled those in Central Europe and Northern China in intensity and, on occasion, in numbers. Several towns and cities were hit by tactical nuclear strikes in an effort to knock out transportation and communication networks. But battle didn't destroy, plague and famine did. Now the war is different. It has become a soldier's war. Small groups of infantry and horse cavalry, referred to as equine mobile by some, conducted long-range patrols and penetration raids. There are numerous small outposts and forward bases scattered throughout the area. Although vehicles are still used, they tend to be restricted to in their travel to what's left of the road network or the valleys. This can make them sitting ducks for aircraft and tech helicopters, which Iran's oil resources have kept in operation. Major operations, battalion size and above, are rare because of the poor state of the road network, which tends to rule out mobile strikes and makes logistics even more of a nightmare than usual. Characters begin playing Lorgandan, Iran, about 150 kilometers south-southeast of Esfahan on the RDF sourcebook map. This is 75 millimeter down from whatever. Yeah. Okay. Talks about the conduct of the adventure, the encounters. More or less, you're either, like I said, you're either been tapped by the military government of the United States, or the civilian government of the United States, or perhaps the British, or one of the other NATO's allies, or an independent source to come in here and help locate and recover the Iranian Crown Jewels before the Soviets find them. We get our important persons. And I always find these things interesting, always nice and good reads, because it gives you so much background. And then there's the opportunity to utilize these characters as NPCs in other game systems, if you're prone to that sort of thing. Then we got organizations, the Tuda Party, or the Iranian Communist Party, the Pastaran, the Shir Iran, or Shahir Iran, Lions of Persia, whatever that meant. I'm sorry that my pronunciation skills are so poor. Tudor movement. Then we have the Tudor Special Police Force, Soviet 74th KGB motorized rifle, Soviet 19th motorized rifle. There are various Soviet and Warsaw Pact forces, and then our NATO. Here are the U.S. contingents, and the Iranian NATO-backed Iranian contingents. So we got here the U.S. 3-187th of the 101st Air Assault Division, U.S. Battery 1-6th Artillery, 18th FA Brigade, U.S. Company A, 101st Aviation Battalion, 101st AAD, U.S. Team Bravo 99 of the 5th Special Forces Group, U.S. Detachment 14, 619th Combat Security Group. Marauders, Order Battle, nice little maps. Like I said, these are intended to be pullouts to hand it over to the players and be utilized on the table. And as I keep saying, since I never played the game, I never had the opportunity or the desire to remove these, which means they're still intact. Frankly, as I've said in the past, these I would rather just scan and Xerox or scan and print off on my printer as opposed to take them out of the books nowadays. Change of pace, referee's notes, the raid is the actual guts of the mission of the game. Special encounter 1, as long as we're in the neighborhood. Talks about friendly forces and enemy forces, tactical procedures, using air assets. Just like, for example, the 187th Infantry 101st Air Assault Division, 400 men, is currently U.S. Army. The current U.S. Army is stationed at Lorgadan, L-O-R-D-E-G-A-N. Unit maintains a high rate of patrol activity within 20-kilometer radius of the town, and still has active aircraft. Recovering the treasure. So there are two main considerations from the referee must keep in mind when running the adventure to recover the crown jewels. First is whether the players have actually attacked the signal compound in which they were sent to raid the initial scenario. The second is whether they returned to Lorgnan before going after the jewels. Third consideration, what makes less difference on the outset of the mission to recover the jewels matters a great deal. The conclusion is whether or not the players have informed their superiors of their intent. So, ideally, like I said, your groups either found their way to this region and for other reasons, and then discover the location or the potential location of these missing crown jewels, and then decide to either go after them as mercenaries in their own interests, or as imply that they go to their superiors, and superiors set up the mission to recover them. Or you've been tapped from the group's been tapped for their growing reputation in Poland and in Central Europe and other locations to come here and assist the authorities, the U.S. military specifically, or perhaps the British, in recovering the crown jewels. It's up to how you or the players wish to pursue it. It's always an interesting dilemma about these kind of games, because technically, or this particular game, technically speaking, the members of the players are still part of the NATO forces or the various government forces they may originally belong to, or they've joined the U.S. military, so to speak. And are they still an active military unit? Are they still participating in these missions because of some civic or patriotic duty? Or is it a sense of survival? Or have they gone totally mercenary? Because if they've gone totally mercenary, then that kind of changes the vibe a little bit too, and how much they should have support-wise, or I should say how easy they should gain support from these various still functioning government bodies and military units that are associated with government bodies. So then we have further adventures in the area, the southwest sector. So this particular says chapter D. Bounded by the north and east by the line that passes through the Lorgan, Vinak, Snurian, Hana, Khazro, Shin, and Sadar before the war. Farming were the predominant areas of occupation. Basically, there's a lot of options here for other additional adventures, and just about every module I encounter could be utilized as an entire campaign or the basis from an entire campaign. So if you'd ever take advantage of the other game modules and stuff, then you're not in or out nothing. I always find these things interesting. Here we got some various towns and villages, their conditions, rumor charts. Here's a couple. Case of encounter. Civilian 1, a merchant in the marketplace in Iraq was willingly to talk freely with the characters. Roll for 3 rumors on the rumors and information table. Civilian 2, a bearded man in tattered robes and a green turban approaches the characters and greets them in Farsi. Many of the characters reply. He will begin a conversation. He introduces himself as Jamad Mansour. Should the characters offer him food, he will graciously accept. On a successful average recon roll, the characters will realize he is studying them intently as he asks them various questions about their background and their religious beliefs. Jamad is a mullah or holy man, and he's testing the character's manners and knowledge of Islam. The referee can either roll to play this encounter out or have each character make an average intelligence plus education /2 roll. If the outcome goes against the character, Jammer will simply bid them a good day and walk away. If the outcome is favorable, Jammer will become a little more animated. Then roll for 2 rumors on the rumors information table. Marauders. Rumors and interrogation results. Central sector. Northern sector. Here's our rumor tout. Rumor A, the French and the Russians are trying to make a deal to divide Iran between them. Rumor H, the Russians are preparing for a great offensive that will drive the Americans back into the sea. There are troops pouring in from all over Russia, which we know that's not true. Rumor K, there's been increased traffic in the black market goods lately. Someone with the right product or right connections can make a fortune. Rumor P, the head man of the town of Bannack is on the take from several bandit gangs. He allows them to operate out of Bannack in return for a share of the loot. Rumor S, there's a 10,000-man Chinese mercenary army coming in from the east. They're going to sell their services to the highest bidder. Rumor 5, the Russians are skinning prisoners alive at the POW camp just north of Nafarabad. Rumor Z, a nuclear submarine being serviced to the north of Tehran in the Caspian Sea exploded last month, and all the rain across northern and central Iran since then has been radioactive. Lots of ways of interesting things and stuff. That's another thing I did like about this particular game system is this rumor mill that kind of goes part and parcel with everything you know about the military men and women that do love their rumors and gossip. So there we have King's Ransom, Twilight 2000. Buy it or love it.